Hello everyone! Welcome to Stylist Studio Dolls. I'm an adult collector of American Girl dolls, and the videos on my channel are intended for other adult collectors. However, I did want to let you know that this video is a tutorial and it is absolutely G-rated, so I just thought I'd throw that out there in case this is a tutorial that you would like to try with your kids. So this video is called How to Make a Tutu for Your Doll for Valentine's Day. Tutus and tulle fabric in general are trending this spring, so this is something you can also incorporate into your doll's spring wardrobe. You may have seen tutorials similar to this for adult size tutus, and I have done one in the past. This was my Halloween costume a few years ago, and I included the picture with my son just because I love the picture. So as I was making tutus for my dolls, I realized that there were a few tips and tricks that I was coming up with that would be worth sharing with all of you as I was converting this from human size to doll size. So I thought I'd just make this video and share those tips with you. These are the supplies you'll need. First, you'll need tulle fabric. Secondly, you will need ribbon or elastic for the waistband. You'll need scissors and a ruler if you choose to use one. This is not an exact science, and you can just eyeball this if you choose not to use a ruler. Before we get started, I would like to talk a little bit about tulle. So this is regular old run-of-the-mill tulle fabric that you can find at any fabric store. It's about $2 per yard, sometimes even less. It comes in matte or shiny. Please be aware that there are also specialty tulles that have printed designs on them or special finishes, and sometimes those are up to $10 a yard, maybe even more. So definitely check the price on the bolt before you have it cut. It usually comes in 48 to 54 inch widths. I also wanted to talk about this type of tulle. This is a printed design, but these also come in plain and shiny varieties. And this is a tulle strip that actually comes on a roll. Sometimes you can buy it per yard and sometimes you can buy the entire roll, but having the smaller strips will probably make this project even easier. This is another thing I wanted to talk about. This is not technically tulle, but you may find this at the fabric store. It's more of a netting, but it can be used for tutus. Just be mindful that it's stiffer. It's also cheaper. It's only about $1 a yard, and it will definitely work for tutus if you choose to use it. I also wanted to discuss other fabrics. You may come across a fabric that looks like this. This is not tulle. This is actually an organza fabric. And if you sew, you probably know this, but I am talking to those of you who don't sew because you don't need any sewing skills to do this project. So a fabric like this will fray. So there are two things you can do to get around that. You can use pinking shears, which are those scissors that cut in a zigzag pattern, and that will reduce some of the fraying. Or you can just cut it with straight edge scissors and allow it to fray and choose to have that as part of your design. That's entirely up to you. If you don't want it to fray, make sure the bolt says tulle on it. If you don't mind the fraying, you can really use any thin fabric that you choose to use. The first thing I'm going to do to cut this tulle is fold it. I folded it once and again so that all four corners line up right here. And then I'm going to cut across this to have a nice clean edge to start with. Okay. As I mentioned, this is not all that hard, but I'm just going to show you how I cut this. So it's still folded over, so there are 4 layers of tulle here. This is the corner where all the corners meet, and I've cut this edge fairly straight. And then I'm just going to go in with my ruler, measure out 2 inches, use my rotary cutter. Whoops. Cut that. Oops. Pull it off. Line it up again. If that hadn't caught, this wouldn't have been as hard to line up again, but sometimes that happens. And just carry on cutting 2-inch strips. Okay, so after this next one, I'll show you the next step. All right, so now you can carefully move that piece because you'll probably want to cut more. So after those 2 cuts, I now have 4 pieces of tulle that are the length of the fabric, excuse me. And I'm just gonna line them up here on my cutting board. You can do one at a time with this if you want to. I'm going to make a stack. So I'm using my cutting mat and lining these up, but you can just line them up on the table and use a ruler for this next step. No problem whatsoever. My voice is scratchy. I have a cold. I work at a school and everyone is sick. So just one of those winter things, but I'm gonna be just fine. So I'm stacking up 4 of these. And the edges don't entirely line up the entire way down. It's not a big deal. As I said, this is not an exact science. Will drive you crazy if you try to turn it into one. So I have 4 stacked up. So now every time I cut, I have 4 pieces the length that I want them. So I'm cutting these at 12 inches. Unfortunately, my cutting mat is 22 inches, so when I do 12, I have to move them. I can't do 2 in a row. So that's at 7, so I'll come down here to 19. All right, and then I suddenly have 8 strips. So I will talk more about how many you need for each thing and also about different lengths and whatnot later. All right, so this is pretty much the how to create a tutu right here. This should only take me about a minute. So this ribbon is cut at about 24 inches. I like to have a lot extra. My plan is to make the tutu and then tie it on her and make a pretty little bow. You could either put it in the back or the front, totally up to you. All right, so here we go. I am going to get 2 pieces of my 12-inch, that's wrinkly, of my 12-inch tulle. Stack them up. Now, I have found so far as I'm experimenting that I do this 2 different ways. Sometimes I use 2 different colors of tulle, one lighter than the other, and the one I want to be on top, sometimes I put on the bottom and then I kind of roll this up. If they are the same color, doesn't matter at all. You can just sort of pinch it together in the middle, fold it in half, make the ends pretty even. You can always trim it later if you need to. So now I have a little loop. All right, so now up to you. Doesn't make a bit of difference if you want to push the loop under or put it over, but what you're going to do is just simply, it's hard to do on camera, I guess, just simply pull the tail ends through your loop while going around the ribbon. And as I said, when you can, have this right up near you, it's not as difficult as I'm making it seem. Okay, so now I'm gonna put my ends together as I tighten it, try to get them the same length. Okay, so see, I've tightened it. See what it's done to the ribbon? Okay, now just pull your ribbon apart, straighten it out, and there you go. So the reason that I said it doesn't matter how you tie your knot is that when this is finished, you can choose to either have this side of the knot showing or this side of the knot showing. Does not matter. Either way, just however you choose to do it the same way all the way down. So your tutu will just be made up of several of these. And that's it. I am going to show you the ones that I made on dolls, give you some pointers and tips that I learned from doing it for a doll size. I have made this tutu for an adult, which I've probably already shown you a picture. But yeah, that's it. Pretty easy. I can just keep working here. Make my little loop. Pull the ends through. Oh, I am glad I did two on video actually. So after you've tightened the second one, then you can slide them together. Don't feel like you have to tie the knots right up against each other. Give yourself some slack and then pull them together. And you will decide, and I'll talk more about this when I show it on the dolls too, you can have these spaced. You can have them really tight together so that it's more fluffy. And obviously the more that you smash together, the fuller and fluffier the tutu will be. And that is it. All right, this is the fun part. I get to show you the tutus that I made. So I'll share with you some of the lessons I learned along the way. When I made an adult size tutu, I used 6-inch wide strips. So for the dolls, I used 2-inch wide strips. And I'm really happy with that. I think that was very successful. What I wasn't prepared for is when you make a human size one, there's more fabric, it weighs itself down a little more. With this, I used such short little strips that when I put it on her, some of the tulle was like up to her chin. And I thought, oh no, this isn't gonna work. But then I started pulling the pieces down, just one or two at a time, kind of training them downward. And it didn't take all that long, a couple minutes. I had it down looking like this. It's still very puffy. One reason is that I did use some of that netting fabric that's stiffer, and so that is definitely going to give you a fuller look. But I am happy with this. This is a traditional tutu in my mind. So that's how it came out. The specifics of this tutu, if you like this one, are use a 12.5-inch piece of 1/4 inch elastic. I used black. You'll need 84 9-inch by 2-inch pieces of tulle. So in that 84, you'll need 28 pieces of black tulle, 28 pieces of red tulle, and 28 pieces of the red netting. So for the arrangement, what I did was I made the knots exactly like I showed you in the video. For the first 2 knots, I used 1 piece of red tulle and 1 piece of red netting. And I did put the tulle down on the table and then the netting on top of it and sort of rolled the netting into the tulle. The reason I did that is that when you just use the netting, it makes the knots around the waistband kind of hairy, if you will, like there's more little edges sticking out. And that sort of bothered me, so I rolled it up to sort of encase the netting in the tulle. I hope that makes sense. It doesn't really matter if your knots are a little hairy. I am just very particular, so that's how I did it. So the first 2 knots were like that. The third knot was 2 pieces of black tulle. Can just bunch those up. You don't have to roll those. You never have to roll them if you don't want to. You can just bunch them up. But then I repeated that sequence of 2 red, 1 black, 2 red, 1 black. So there are 14 sets of 3 to make a total of 42 knots all the way around. I was left with 1 inch of elastic on each end when I was finished. That was plenty for me to tie a knot, but if you want to allow a little more elastic to give yourself a little more room to make that knot, go ahead and cut your elastic a little longer, maybe 14 inches. And I will let you know, this one had the most knots of any of the tutus I made. I really had them smashed together. You don't have to make it that tight and use this many knots if you don't want to. This is the second tutu I made, and I think this is the most successful of the 3 that I did for this video. I really like the length of the pieces I used, the spacing of the knots. I think it's just right. Here are the specifics for this one. I used a 27-inch piece of 1/4 inch ribbon. In this case, I used dark pink. I used 68 pieces of tulle that were 12 inches by 2 inches. So of that 68, 34 were dark pink tulle and 34 pieces were light pink tulle. So for the arrangement, I knotted 1 dark pink tulle with 1 light pink tulle for every knot. So a little more simple than the last one. What I did was I laid out the light pink tulle and then put the dark pink tulle on top and rolled it up. Once again, I was essentially encasing the dark pink tulle in the light pink tulle because I wanted to lighten up the dark pink tulle a little bit. So when you're doing the knots, you have the most concentration of color there because you're squeezing so much together. And so I didn't want the dark pink tulle on the outside. Again, I know this is very OCD of me, but that's how I wanted to do it. So I rolled these. That's just how I did it. So I had 34 knots total and spaced around, and then I had just enough ribbon left on each side to make a cute little bow in the back. So this is not quite as full as the last tutu because there are fewer knots. All right, this is the final one. And I do realize that this does not create a complete outfit. These tights are far too thin and her underwear are showing, but luckily Styla is a professional model and so she doesn't mind in the least. But my plan is to make Valentine's outfits for each of these tutus. So these are not the outfits that they'll be wearing these tutus with. You'll have to come back for my Valentine's video to see those. So these are the specifics for this sort of half tutu. It's sort of a tiered bustle style. So I used a 27-inch piece of 1/4 inch white ribbon, and this whole thing is just red tulle. So I used 20 pieces of 16 by 2 inch pieces of red tulle. I used 4 pieces of 12-inch by 2 inch red tulle, and I used 4 pieces of 9-inch by 2 inch red tulle. For the arrangement, the first knot was 2 9-inch pieces of tulle. The second knot was 2 12-inch pieces of tulle. The next 10 knots were 2 16-inch pieces of tulle. And then I finished off with a knot of 2 12-inch pieces and a knot of 2 9-inch pieces. I wanted it to taper from short on the sides to long in the back. So that's it for the tutorial, but I just kept having more and more ideas after I made those tutus, so I thought I'd just throw those out there. You can add other fabrics and or ribbon to your knots. You can use 1 color of tulle or 10 colors of tulle in the same tutu, totally up to you. You could cut the pieces after you've assembled the tutu. What I mean by that is that you could take each piece and sort of cut the bottom into 2 or 3 parts to make it more fluffy and crazy. Or you could cut each piece into points at the end, make it more of sort of like a fairy skirt. You could make an uneven or tapered hem. And going along with that, you could use random lengths and widths. Just go crazy, make the whole thing random. You could make a destroyed tutu. And by that I mean use fabric that frays, let it fray, encourage it to fray. What made me sort of think of this is that supposedly American Girl, it's a rumor, but supposedly American Girl is coming out with a Wednesday Addams doll. And I don't know if she would ever wear a tutu, but if she did, it would definitely be a destroyed goth kind of style. And I think it would be really fun to make a tutu like that. And another idea I had is that you could use this tutorial to make a petticoat for a dress that you already have. Maybe you have a dress that didn't come with a petticoat, you think it should have, or you just have one that would benefit from having a petticoat under it. So you don't have to make it as full as these because no one's going to see the waistband under the dress. So you could even just do like 10 knots spaced around just to give your dress a little more fullness. And obviously you could go as full as you want with that. Really, the sky's the limit with this. Just have fun. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Come back soon to see the outfits I make for these girls for Valentine's Day. And as always, I hope your dolls are making you smile each and every day. Until next time, take care.